On the rooftop of Sterling Aviation's glass tower in downtown Seattle, the Bell 407 helicopter sat waiting under a Tuesday morning sky that promised nothing but problems. Madison Hart paced the helipad in her tailored black Armani suit, phone pressed so hard against her ear that her knuckles had gone white. The city sprawled below her, 43 stories of distance between her and the traffic that would kill her timeline. $45 million waited across town. 45 million reasons she needed to be in the air 5 minutes ago. Her assistant Jordan stood 3 feet away, his own phone glued to his face, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool October air. Behind him, Sarah Chen, the senior operations coordinator, scrolled frantically through her tablet, calling every backup pilot in the Pacific Northwest. The helicopter's rotors sat motionless. The fuel tank read full. The keys dangled in the ignition. Everything ready except the one thing that mattered. Madison's voice cut through the rooftop wind, sharp enough to draw blood. "I don't care if he's in the hospital. Find me someone who can fly this aircraft. Now." Jordan's face had gone pale. "Marcus says his wrist is fractured in 3 places. He can't grip the controls. Every charter service in Seattle is booked or can't mobilize in time. The backup we keep on retainer is in Vancouver at a family funeral. The third option just told me his license got suspended last week for a DUI." Madison stopped pacing. The city noise from below seemed to fade, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She stared at the helicopter, this machine that should have been her solution. Now just an expensive piece of metal mocking her from 20 feet away. Her phone buzzed. Robert Hart, her uncle, board member. The man who'd been waiting for her to fail since the day she took over her father's company 6 months ago. She answered. "Madison, I heard about Marcus." His voice carried that particular tone of concern that really meant satisfaction. "You need to reschedule the tech core meeting. Driving will never get you there in time. And this isn't worth risking." "We're not rescheduling. The board won't support a CEO who gambles major contracts on pride. This is exactly the kind of emotional decision-making that..." Madison's jaw clenched so tight she thought her teeth might crack. "This isn't emotion. This is reliability. We promised TechCore a signature today at 10:30. That's what they're getting." "And how exactly do you plan to..." She hung up. The phone immediately started buzzing again. She silenced it. Sarah looked up from her tablet, defeat written across her features. "Madison, we're out of options. Every qualified pilot within 50 miles is unavailable, unresponsive, or unlicensed. We have to drive." The math was simple and brutal. 38 miles through Seattle traffic on a Tuesday morning. Best case scenario, 90 minutes. More realistic, 2 hours. The meeting started in 87 minutes. TechCore's CEO had made it clear that punctuality mattered as much as the proposal itself. Show up late, lose the deal. It was that simple. Madison thought about her father. Thomas Hart had built Sterling Aviation from nothing, scraping together every dollar, every contract, every relationship over 30 years. He taught her that in business, your word was the only currency that really mattered. Promise something, deliver it, or die trying. He died trying. Heart attack in this very building 18 months ago, collapsed at his desk working on a pitch that would have saved them from a bad quarter. Derek's face flashed through her mind. Her ex-fiancé, who'd promised to stand beside her through anything, who talked about partnership and building something together, right up until the day she inherited her father's CEO chair. Then suddenly he couldn't handle being Mr. Hart. Couldn't stomach the idea of his girlfriend having more power than him. Couldn't. The excuses had piled up until he'd finally said what he really meant. "I need to be with someone who has time for a relationship, Madison. Someone who isn't married to a company." 6 months of silence since then. 6 months of proving she didn't need anyone. 6 months of building walls so high that even she couldn't see over them sometimes. The rooftop door opened. Madison didn't turn around, too focused on calculating impossible equations in her head. Drive and arrive late, or stay and lose everything. "Ma'am." The voice was quiet, male, unfamiliar. She spun around. The man wore the gray maintenance uniform that all the cleaning staff used, Sterling Aviation's logo stitched over the left breast pocket. He was tall, probably 6'1" or 6'2", with short brown hair that showed hints of gray at the temples. Lean build. Tired eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and expected nothing good. He held a mop in his right hand. Jordan and Sarah turned to stare. The man took 2 steps forward, setting the mop against the wall. "I can fly it." The words hung in the air for exactly 1 second before Sarah burst out laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but the kind of laugh that comes from stress and absurdity colliding. Jordan joined in, a nervous bark that echoed across the rooftop. "Dude, seriously?" Sarah shook her head. "This isn't a video game. That's a $500,000 aircraft." Jordan wiped his eyes. "Man, I appreciate the effort, but maybe stick to mopping floors, yeah?" The man didn't react, didn't smile, didn't flinch, didn't show any sign that their mockery registered. He just stood there, hands at his sides, waiting. Madison studied him, really looked at him, the way she'd been trained to assess people in negotiations. His posture was too straight for someone used to being invisible. Military bearing, maybe. His eyes, despite the exhaustion, held a steady focus that didn't waver under scrutiny. And something about the way he'd spoken, that quiet statement delivered without bravado or doubt, struck a chord she couldn't quite identify. Desperation was a hell of a drug. She walked toward him, closing the distance until she stood 5 feet away. "You're telling me you can fly a Bell 407 helicopter?" He nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you have a license?" "Commercial rotorcraft rating. Current." Sarah's laughter cut off. Jordan's smile faded. Madison pulled out her phone, opened the FAA registry, fingers flying across the screen. "Name? Ethan Ross." She typed, waited for the database to load. Cellular signal always got spotty this high up. The screen flickered. Then results populated. Ethan Michael Ross, commercial rotorcraft license, issued 7 years ago, renewed annually online. Current status, active. No restrictions, no violations. Madison looked up. "When's the last time you flew?" 3 years ago. 3 years. The license was current, but he hadn't touched controls in 3 years. This was insane. This was beyond insane. Every protocol in the book said you didn't let someone fly a company aircraft without verifying their recent experience, without checking references, without, at minimum, a supervised test flight. But the helicopter was right there. TechCore was $45 million waiting across town. And this man, this janitor with a valid license and impossible calm, was her only option. Robert's words echoed in her head. Emotional decision-making. Gambling on pride. She smiled, cold and sharp. "Fly this helicopter and get me to TechCore in one piece. I'll give you a $10,000 bonus." Ethan's expression didn't change. "I don't want your money. I just want to help." That stopped her. In Madison's experience, everyone wanted money. Everyone wanted something. But this man in his gray uniform, standing on a rooftop with nothing to gain and everything to lose, just wanted to help. Sarah grabbed Madison's arm. "You're not actually getting in that thing." Madison pulled away. Her decision was made. Reckless, maybe. Desperate, certainly. But her father's voice was louder than her fear. "We don't have a choice." She walked toward the helicopter. Ethan moved ahead of her, his mop forgotten against the wall, his entire demeanor shifting in a way that made Madison's breath catch. He walked like someone who belonged there. No hesitation, no second guessing. He circled the aircraft, checking panels, testing the landing skids, running his hand along the tail rotor. Every movement precise, professional, the actions of someone who'd done this so many times it had become muscle memory. Madison climbed into the passenger seat, fastened the harness with shaking hands, and put on the headset. Static crackled in her ears. Then Ethan's voice came through, clear and professional. "Ready?" She nodded. "Let's go." The engine roared to life. The rotors began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, the familiar whine building to a crescendo. Madison gripped the edge of her seat. Behind her, through the window, she could see Sarah and Jordan standing on the helipad, staring up in stunned disbelief. The helicopter lifted off smoothly. No jerking, no wobbling, just a clean vertical rise that carried them above the building and into the Seattle morning. Madison's stomach dropped. Not from the movement, but from the realization of what she'd just done. She'd put herself in an aircraft with a man whose name she'd learned 3 minutes ago, flying over a major city, betting everything on a janitor's word. Ethan adjusted the collective with a touch so light the helicopter barely tilted. He banked left over Elliott Bay, threading between air traffic corridors with the confidence of someone who'd done this in far more dangerous skies. His hands moved over the controls with quiet elegance. His eyes scanned the instruments, the horizon, the airspace around them, absorbing everything at once. Madison couldn't take her eyes off him. This wasn't luck. This wasn't beginner's confidence. This was mastery. She tried to speak, but her voice caught. Finally, she managed. "Where did you learn to fly him?" Ethan didn't look at her. "I used to do this for a living." His tone was neutral, almost detached, like he was discussing something that happened to someone else a long time ago. The city spread below them, buildings giving way to water as they crossed over Puget Sound. The morning sun caught the waves, turning them silver. Beautiful day for flying, Madison thought absurdly. Perfect visibility, no wind to speak of, just smooth air and open sky. Then Ethan's hands tightened on the controls. It was subtle. Madison almost missed it, but the helicopter's nose dipped slightly, the altitude dropping 5 feet before recovering. She glanced over. Ethan's jaw had clenched. His breathing had changed, faster and shallower. His eyes, which had been scanning methodically across the instruments, were now fixed on one point below them. The water. "Ethan?" He didn't respond. The helicopter dipped again, this time 10 feet. Madison's training kicked in. She'd taken basic flight courses, knew enough to be dangerous in an emergency. Her hand moved toward the controls. "Ethan!" He blinked, sucked in air like a drowning man breaking the surface. His hands moved, quick and certain, pulling them back to stable altitude. The helicopter leveled out, continuing on course as if nothing had happened. "I'm fine, sorry." But Madison had seen it. Seen the freeze, the moment where Ethan wasn't flying the helicopter anymore, wasn't even in the helicopter anymore. He'd been somewhere else entirely, somewhere that scared him so badly he'd lost himself in it. Post-traumatic stress. Had to be. Which meant he probably was military. Which meant there was a story here that started to explain why a trained pilot was mopping floors and refusing money. The flight continued. 12 minutes total. Ethan set the helicopter down on the TechCore landing pad with a touch so light Madison barely felt the skids make contact. The kind of landing that didn't even rattle the coffee cup in the center console. He powered down the engine, removed his headset, and stepped out without a word. Madison sat in her seat, hands still gripping the armrests, staring straight ahead. Her entire body trembled. Not from fear, from shock. From the realization that she'd just been flown across a major city by a janitor who handled a multi-million-dollar aircraft like it was an extension of his own body. By a man who'd frozen over water, clearly fighting demons she couldn't see, and still landed them safely. She unbuckled slowly, climbed out, and walked toward the building entrance where the TechCore executives were waiting. Ethan stood by the helicopter, hands in his pockets, watching her go. She turned back, met his eyes, asked the question she couldn't hold in any longer. "Who are you?" Ethan's expression softened just slightly. "Someone who used to matter." Then he turned and walked back toward the helicopter. The TechCore meeting lasted 90 minutes. Madison sat in their conference room, shaking hands, smiling, talking numbers and timelines and partnership opportunities. Her presentation was flawless. She'd memorized every slide, every projection, every response to every possible question. The CEO, a silver-haired man named Richard Chen, nodded approvingly throughout. "Sterling Aviation has impressed us from the beginning, but this kind of commitment to punctuality, to keeping your word no matter the obstacles, that's exactly what we need in a partner." Papers were signed, hands were shaken, $45 million secured. Madison should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow, because the entire time her mind was somewhere else, on a rooftop, in a helicopter, with a man who flew like a ghost and spoke in riddles. When she stepped back outside an hour and a half later, the helicopter was gone. So was Ethan. That evening, Madison sat alone in her corner office on the 42nd floor, staring at her computer screen. The city lights sparkled below, thousands of people going about their lives, unaware of the $45 million deal that had just saved Sterling Aviation's quarter. unaware of the impossible flight that had made it possible. She pulled up the company's employee database and typed in his name. Ethan Ross, the file loaded, bare bones, hired 14 months ago. Position, janitorial staff, no prior employment listed, no references, no background check beyond a basic criminal record scan, which had come back clean. It was the kind of file you'd expect from someone who didn't want to be noticed. Madison leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against the desk. Then she made a call, not to HR, to an old friend who worked in military records at Joint Base Lewis McChord. Marcus Reyes had been her father's lawyer before going into government work. He owed her family more favors than she could count. When he answered on the third ring, she didn't waste time on pleasantries. Marcus, I need you to look someone up for me, quietly. A pause. Madison, that's technically not allowed. Military records aren't public information. I need to know who I just let fly me across the city. Another pause. Longer this time. Name, Ethan Ross, mid-30s probably. Would have been Army, I think. Helicopter pilot. She heard typing. Give me a couple hours. Marcus called back at 9:30 at night. Madison was still in her office, pretending to review contracts, but really just staring out the window, trying to make sense of the day. Jesus, Madison, where did you find this guy? Her pulse quickened. Just tell me. Marcus's voice was low, almost reverent. Ethan Michael Ross, Captain, United States Army, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers. Madison sat forward. The Night Stalkers, she knew that name. Everyone who paid attention to military news knew that name. They were the best of the best, the pilots who flew special forces into impossible situations and got them out alive. Marcus continued. 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, Distinguished Flying Cross, Bronze Star with Valor, 89 combat missions. He was a medevac specialist. Extracted wounded soldiers under fire. Madison's hand tightened around the phone. There's something else. An incident on his last tour. His co-pilot was hit during an extraction. Enemy fire came through the cockpit. The co-pilot took shrapnel to the spine. Ethan completed the mission despite the damage, saved 6 soldiers, but the co-pilot ended up paralyzed from the waist down. That wasn't Ethan's fault. No, but he carried it like it was, got the Distinguished Flying Cross for that mission. The co-pilot got a medical discharge in a wheelchair. Some people say that's what broke him. Madison closed her eyes. Why did he leave? Silence, Vaughn. Then Marcus's voice, gentler than before. His wife died in a car accident while he was deployed. 8 months pregnant. The baby survived, born premature by emergency C-section. A son named Tyler. Ethan took honorable discharge 3 weeks later and walked away from everything. The office felt smaller suddenly. Colder. Anything else? Marcus hesitated. Yeah, he declined all his veteran benefits. Pension, health care, housing allowance. All of it. It's like he wanted to erase himself completely. Madison hung up without saying goodbye. For a long time, she just sat there staring at the city lights. A hero, a father, a man who'd lost everything and chosen to disappear. And she'd mocked him, made a cruel joke about money while he stood there, silent and composed, asking for nothing. Over the next few days, Madison began to notice things she'd never paid attention to before. She saw Ethan in the hallways, moving quietly between floors, emptying trash, wiping down glass doors. Always efficient, always invisible. A ghost haunting the building where he'd once saved her from disaster. She saw him in the break room at midnight, heating up leftovers in a microwave, while a small boy slept on a bench nearby. The child, Tyler, couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. Thin, with his dead mother's blonde hair, clutching a notebook covered in crayon drawings of helicopters. Madison watched through the glass as Ethan checked his son's forehead for fever with the back of his hand, adjusted the blanket without waking him, whispered something she couldn't hear, though the shape of the words looked like, "I've got you, buddy." Another night, she saw Ethan carry Tyler down to the company's small medical office because the boy had a low fever. He didn't ask for help, didn't complain, just handled it the way he seemed to handle everything. Alone, quietly, without expecting anything from anyone. Madison started watching him the way she used to watch flight simulations when she was learning to fly. analyzing every detail. She noticed that Ethan never ate in the cafeteria. He brought his own food, usually a sandwich and an apple, and ate in the stairwell. She noticed that he always arrived exactly on time and left exactly when his shift ended, never a minute early. She noticed that he avoided eye contact with executives, kept his head down, and spoke only when spoken to. He was invisible by design, and the more she watched, the more she realized something that made her chest ache. Ethan wasn't hiding because he was ashamed. He was hiding because he was protecting something. His son, his peace, the fragile, quiet life he'd built in the wreckage of his old one. On Friday night, Madison stayed late deliberately. She knew Ethan's shift ended at 11. She waited in the lobby, pretending to review documents on her tablet, checking her watch every few minutes. At 10:50, Ethan walked through with Tyler on his shoulders. The boy was half asleep, head resting against his father's, arms wrapped loosely around Ethan's neck. They looked like a portrait of something precious and temporary. Madison stood up. "Ethan." He stopped, turning slowly, his expression guarded. "Miss Hart." She hesitated, suddenly unsure of herself. This man who had saved her deal, who flew like an angel despite his demons, who was raising a child alone while mopping floors to survive. "I never thanked you for the flight." Ethan shrugged, the motion careful not to disturb Tyler. "Just doing what needed to be done." Madison took a breath. "I know who you are, what you were." Ethan's jaw tightened. For the first time, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, something closer to resignation. "Then you know I'm not that person anymore." Madison nodded slowly. "Maybe, but you're still someone." Tyler stirred on Ethan's shoulders, mumbling something about airplanes. Ethan gently lowered him to the ground. The boy leaned against his father's leg, eyes half closed. Madison crouched down to Tyler's level. "Hi, Tyler." The boy blinked at her, then looked up at his dad. Ethan gave a small nod. Tyler looked back at Madison. "You're the lady from the office." Madison smiled. "That's me. I hear you like airplanes." Tyler's face brightened slightly. He pulled his notebook from his backpack and showed her a drawing. It was a helicopter, surprisingly detailed for a 5-year-old. Rotors and tail boom and little stick figures inside. "This is my dad." Tyler pointed to one of the figures. "He's the best pilot in the world." Madison's throat tightened. She glanced up at Ethan, who was looking away. Jaw set. "I believe you." That night, Madison couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Tyler's drawing, about the way Ethan had looked when his son called him the best pilot in the world, about the weight of a life lived in the shadows. She thought about her own life, the contracts, the board meetings, the empty penthouse she went home to every night, the emails she answered at 2 in the morning because there was nothing else to do. She'd built an empire, but she'd built it alone. And for the first time in 6 months since Derek had walked out and her father had died, she wondered if that was really what she wanted. The next morning, she made a decision. She called Ethan to her office. He arrived 15 minutes later, still in his uniform, looking cautious. "Am I in trouble?" Madison shook her head. "No, I want to offer you something." She explained that TechCore had reached out after hearing about the flight. Not from her. The story had leaked somehow, probably through Richard Chen's assistant who'd seen them land. They wanted to bring in a consultant to help design their new pilot training simulators. Someone with real-world experience. Someone who understood aviation at the highest level. It's a 6-month contract. $120,000, flexible hours, mostly remote work. You could do it from home. Ethan stared at her. "Why are you doing this?" Madison met his gaze. "Because you're wasted mopping floors." Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he shook his head. "I appreciate it, but no." Madison blinked. "Why not?" Ethan's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Because I don't need to be noticed. I don't need a title. I just need Tyler to be safe and happy. That's it." Madison didn't push. She just nodded. But as Ethan turned to leave, she said one more thing. "You know, you don't have to disappear to protect him. You can be both, a father and a pilot." Ethan paused at the door, his back to her. He didn't respond. He just walked out. But Madison saw the way his shoulders had tensed, the way he'd hesitated. She knew she'd hit something true. Late one night, Madison found herself wandering the empty floors of the building. She didn't know why. Maybe she needed to think. Maybe she just didn't want to go home to that empty penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and its view of a city full of people she didn't know. She ended up in the engineering wing, near the old simulation bay. The lights were dim, the hallway was silent. Then she heard a sound. Soft, broken, crying. She followed it and found Tyler sitting on the floor outside the simulation room, knees pulled to his chest, tears streaming down his face. Madison's heart clenched. She knelt beside him. "Tyler, what's wrong? Where's your dad?" Tyler hiccuped, wiping his eyes. "He's inside. He said he needed a minute." Madison looked through the glass window of the simulation room. Ethan was sitting in one of the flight rigs, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Madison's breath caught. She'd never seen him like this. The composed pilot, the quiet janitor, the protective father, all of it stripped away, leaving only raw grief. She turned back to Tyler. "Did something happen?" Tyler nodded, his voice small. "He had a bad dream about Mommy." Madison closed her eyes. She sat down beside Tyler, not sure what to say. After a moment, Tyler leaned against her. "I miss her too." He whispered it like a secret. Madison wrapped an arm around him. "I know, sweetheart. I know." They sat like that for a while, silent, two people who barely knew each other, connected by the grief of the man behind the glass. Eventually, the door to the simulation room opened. Ethan stepped out. His eyes were red, but his face was composed. He saw Madison and froze. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone was here." Madison stood, gently guiding Tyler toward his father. "It's okay." Ethan picked up Tyler, holding him close. The boy buried his face in his father's shoulder. Ethan looked at Madison. For the first time, she saw something raw in his eyes. Vulnerability, pain, the kind of hurt that doesn't heal, just gets managed day by day. "I used to be in control. I used to know exactly what to do. Now I don't know anything." Madison's voice was soft. "You're doing fine, Ethan." He shook his head. "I'm barely holding it together." Madison stepped closer. "You flew across the city to save my deal. You're raising a beautiful kid. You're holding it together better than most people ever could." Ethan's voice cracked. "I lost control once. In Afghanistan. My co-pilot got hit. I had to choose between landing to save him or finishing the mission. I chose the mission. He lived, but barely. I got a medal. He got a wheelchair. I've been second-guessing every decision I've made since." Madison felt tears sting her eyes. "Ethan." He looked away. "I left the military because I couldn't trust myself anymore. Then Sarah died and I couldn't even protect her. So I disappeared. Because if I'm nobody, I can't fail anyone." Madison's heart broke. She reached out and touched his arm. "You're not nobody, and you haven't failed anyone." Ethan met her eyes. For a moment, the walls between them crumbled. Madison spoke again, her voice trembling. "I was engaged once, to a man I thought loved me. But the day I became CEO, he left. Said he couldn't handle being second. So I decided I'd never be second again. I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me." She paused. "But I think I've been failing too, just in a different way." They stood there in the dim hallway, two broken people holding their pieces together with sheer will. Tyler had fallen asleep against Ethan's chest, his small breaths creating a rhythm in the silence. Madison looked at the boy, then back at Ethan. "You said you used to fly for your country. What if you flew for yourself? What if you let yourself be great again?" Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can." Madison smiled just a little. "Then maybe I can help you remember." 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo. Madison kept her word, made no more job offers, issued no more invitations. But she couldn't stop watching. From her office window, she tracked Ethan's movements through the building. Arriving at 6:50 every morning, 10 minutes before his shift officially started. Leaving at 11:03 every night, 3 minutes after clock out, just enough time to collect Tyler from wherever the boy was doing homework or drawing. The board meetings grew more contentious. Robert had started his campaign quietly, the way poison works through a system. Whispered concerns to other members about Madison's judgment, questions about her decision-making process, references to that helicopter incident that made it sound reckless rather than desperate. She could feel her father's company slipping through her fingers. Not because she was failing, but because she'd succeeded in a way that made powerful men uncomfortable. TechCore's partnership was proceeding ahead of schedule. Their engineering team loved the preliminary work Sterling had submitted, but Richard Chen had made a specific request in their last video call. His voice friendly but firm. We need someone on site to coordinate the training program development, someone who understands both the technical aviation side and the practical combat applications. Your team mentioned you have a former Night Stalker on staff? Madison's stomach had tightened. We do, but he's not currently in that capacity. Well, we'd like him to be. The contract we discussed includes a line item for a senior training consultant. If he's as good as the rumors suggest, we're prepared to structure compensation accordingly. After the call ended, Madison sat staring at her phone. The company needed Ethan. TechCore wanted Ethan specifically, but she'd promised to leave him alone, and Madison Hart didn't break promises, even when breaking them would save everything she'd built. Wednesday afternoon at 2:15, Madison was reviewing quarterly projections when her assistant Jordan burst through the door without knocking. His face had gone gray. There's a situation. Ground floor. She found Ethan in the lobby, Tyler cradled against his chest. The boy's face was streaked with tears and blood, his nose still dripping crimson onto his Pokemon t-shirt. Ethan's expression was locked down tight, that military control that meant he was holding back something volcanic. Madison moved without thinking. What happened? Ethan's voice came out clipped. Not now, but Tyler looked at her through his tears, recognition breaking through the pain. You're the helicopter lady. The words were thick with congestion, his small voice breaking on the last syllable. Madison felt something crack open in her chest, some wall she hadn't even known was there. Hi, Tyler. Are you okay? Fresh tears spilled down the boy's cheeks. Kids said my dad is just a janitor. I said he's a pilot. They said I was lying. They pushed me and I fell and my nose hit the ground. 5 years old and already learning that the world punishes truth when it doesn't fit the narrative people want to believe. Madison looked at Ethan and saw murder in his eyes, barely contained, not at the children, at the universe that had reduced him to this, to being ashamed of in front of his son. There's a first aid kit in my office. It's closer than the medical room. Ethan hesitated, pride warring with practicality. Tyler's nose dripped another fat drop of blood onto his shirt. Practicality won. Okay. Madison's office had never felt so large. 42 floors up, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle, desk made of reclaimed Boeing fuselage metal. Her father's choice, a reminder of where they came from. Now it felt obscene, this monument to success, while a 5-year-old bled because his father cleaned toilets. She retrieved the first aid kit from her credenza. Ethan set Tyler on the leather couch, kneeling before him with the gentleness of someone who'd learned to handle fragile things. He tilted Tyler's head back, pressing gauze to the bridge of his nose with practiced efficiency. Breathe through your mouth, buddy, just like we practiced. Tyler obeyed, his small chest heaving. Madison stood frozen, watching this man who'd flown Blackhawks through enemy fire now applying ice packs to his kindergartner's bloody nose. The juxtaposition was obscene. Tyler's eyes drifted past his father to the wall behind Madison's desk. His face brightened despite the pain. You have airplane models. Madison followed his gaze. Her father's collection. 20 vintage aircraft, everything from a Wright Flyer to a B-17 to a modern F-22. Each one a story, each one a dream made manifest in metal and mathematics. Want to see them? Ethan started to protest, but Tyler was already nodding, the bleeding slowing. Madison lifted the boy gently, carrying him to the display case. She opened it, letting him look closely at each model. My dad flew a Black Hawk. It's the coolest helicopter in the whole world. Madison glanced at Ethan, who'd gone rigid by the couch. I bet he was really good at it. He saved people. He told me once when I had a nightmare. He saved 6 soldiers and his friend got hurt, but they all came home because of my dad. Children's truth, stripped of context and complexity. Ethan's face had gone pale. Madison understood suddenly what Tyler didn't. That the friend who got hurt was the co-pilot. That coming home in a wheelchair wasn't the same as coming home. That Ethan carried that mission like stones in his pockets, weighing him down toward drowning. Tyler, your dad is the bravest pilot I've ever met. Those kids don't know what they're talking about. Tyler looked at his father for confirmation. Ethan's throat worked, no words coming out. Finally, he managed a nod. Can I tell my teacher you said that? Madison felt Ethan's eyes on her, waiting to see if she'd embarrass him further by making empty promises to his child. Absolutely. Tell her Madison Hart from Sterling Aviation said your dad is a hero. If she wants to verify it, she can call my office. Tyler's smile was sudden and bright, transforming his tear-stained face. He launched himself at Madison, arms wrapping around her neck in a hug that knocked the breath from her lungs. She caught him instinctively, holding this small person who smelled like elementary school and blood and Cheerios. When he pulled back, Ethan's expression had shifted into something she couldn't read. Softer, sadder, grateful and ashamed in equal measure. Say thank you. Thank you, Miss Madison. They left, Tyler chattering about the models, Ethan quiet as a grave. But Madison saw the way his shoulders had lost some of their rigid tension. The way he looked at her when Tyler hugged her, like he was seeing something he'd thought was extinct. Friday evening, Madison found Ethan cleaning the executive wing bathrooms. The floor was empty except for them, everyone gone home to families and lives that existed outside these walls. She knocked on the open door. Ethan, can I talk to you? Not about a job. He straightened from scrubbing a sink, setting down his brush, wary but willing. Okay. The words came harder than she'd expected. Apologies always did, especially for Madison, who'd spent 6 months building armor against vulnerability. I'm sorry for pushing, for digging into your past without permission. That was wrong. Surprise flickered across his face. Okay. Madison pressed on. But I want you to know something. What Tyler said is true. You're not just anything. And he's lucky to have you as a father. Ethan's wall cracked visibly, something raw showing through. He's the only thing I got right. I don't think that's true. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, more like each of them was deciding how much truth they could afford. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low. Why do you care? The question was genuine, not accusatory. Madison realized she didn't have a simple answer, couldn't point to one moment or one reason. It was the accumulation of watching him, seeing how he moved through the world with such careful invisibility, understanding what it cost to live that way. I don't know, maybe because you remind me that there's more to people than what they show. Or maybe because you flew me across a city when you were terrified and you did it anyway. Ethan's eyes met hers, really met them, for the first time since that night in the hallway. You noticed the freeze. Hard to miss. His jaw worked, weighing confession against safety. Confession 1. I haven't flown over water since I got the call about Sarah. I was over the ocean, coming back from a mission. They patched me through via satellite phone. A state trooper telling me my wife was dead and my son was dying and I was 7,000 miles away. Every time I look down at water now, I'm back in that helicopter. Back in that moment when everything ended. The pain in his voice was physical, something you could reach out and touch. Madison didn't try to fill the silence with platitudes. She just let him have it, let the truth sit between them. Thank you for being kind to Tyler. He doesn't have many people. He's a great kid. Ethan nodded, returning to his cleaning. But something had shifted. The wall between them had developed a door, and Madison had just been given the handle. The crisis hit on a Tuesday. Sterling's flagship flight simulator, the Centurion X400 that cost $500,000 and was supposed to be showcased to a potential $20 million client Wednesday morning, crashed harder than a meteor strike. 1 minute the screen showed perfect sky and instrumentation. The next, everything went black and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. Jordan had called every tech support number in their system. The manufacturer's emergency line, which cost $300 just to connect, told them their earliest available technician could arrive Thursday afternoon. The client, a Chinese aerospace firm looking to establish U.S. training operations, had been scheduled for months. Rescheduling would signal weakness, might cost them the entire deal. Madison stayed past midnight, staring at the dead simulator like she could will it back to life through sheer rage. She'd pulled up every manual, watched every YouTube tutorial, called in favors from every engineer she knew. Nothing worked. The machine sat there, an expensive tombstone to her inability to solve the unsolvable. At 1:15 in the morning, Ethan found her. She was sitting on the floor of the simulator room, laptop open, face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. Tears of frustration had dried on her cheeks hours ago, replaced by the hollow exhaustion of defeat. Servo array again? His voice was quiet, matter of fact. Madison looked up and saw him standing in the doorway, mop abandoned in the hall. I don't even know what that means. May I? She gestured helplessly at the machine. Ethan approached it like a surgeon approaching a patient, running his hands over the exterior panels, listening to something Madison couldn't hear. He opened an access port she didn't know existed, peered inside with a small flashlight he produced from his pocket. For the next hour, Madison watched him work. He moved with absolute certainty, hands disappearing into the machine's guts, emerging with components she couldn't name. At one point, he asked her to hold a flashlight. She did, standing close enough to smell his soap and sweat, watching his face in concentration. This was the real Ethan Ross, not the janitor, not even the pilot. This was the soldier who'd kept multi-million-dollar helicopters flying in Afghanistan with nothing but skill and determination. At 2:40 in the morning, he closed the final panel. Try it now. Madison climbed into the cockpit, powered up the system. The screens flickered to life. Controls responded. The entire rig hummed with perfect functionality, better than it had been before the crash. Relief hit her like a physical blow. She climbed out, found Ethan packing his tools back into his pockets. You just saved a $20 million contract. He shrugged. Guess we're even. They stood there in the simulator room, two people whose lives had collided by accident and kept intersecting in ways neither could explain. Madison felt something warm spreading through her chest, something dangerous. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. Coffee was fine. She brought him coffee sometime during the second hour, not even thinking about it. Just instinct, taking care of someone who was taking care of her problems. Now he was smiling, just slightly. The first real smile she'd seen from him. He started to leave, then paused at the door, turned back, used her first name. Madison? The sound of it in his voice did something to her spine. Yeah? You're a good CEO. Your father would be proud. He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the hallway while Madison stood there with tears running down her face. No one had said that to her. Not the board, not the employees, not anyone who'd known Thomas Hart. They'd all been too busy questioning whether she deserved the position to acknowledge that she might be good at it. Over the next month, a routine developed without either of them deciding it should. Madison found reasons to work late. Ethan's shift ended at 11. Somehow they always ended up in the same hallway, the same break room, the same quiet spaces where the building held its breath between day and night. They talked, but carefully, about aviation theory, about the intricacies of helicopter mechanics, about anything except the things that really mattered. Tyler started drawing in Madison's office some nights while Ethan cleaned nearby. She bought the boy a professional-grade colored pencil set, 200 colors in a wooden case. Ethan had almost refused it. Almost. But Tyler's joy had been too pure to deny. One Wednesday night, Tyler fell asleep on Madison's couch during what had become their unspoken arrangement. Madison working at her desk, Tyler drawing on the floor, Ethan visible through the glass walls doing his rounds. When she noticed the boy had dozed off, she mentioned it to Ethan. I'm sorry, he's been having nightmares. Didn't sleep well last night. Madison kept her voice low. About his mom? He doesn't remember her. He was too young. The nightmares are about hospitals, from when he was in NICU. Ethan adjusted Tyler's blanket with the careful precision he brought to everything. Madison saw his hands shake slightly. That must have been terrifying, for both of you. The words opened something in Ethan. He sank into the chair across from her desk, suddenly looking every one of his 33 years and about a dozen more besides. Sarah died on a Thursday. They called me at 0400 local time. By the time I processed what they were saying, she'd been dead for 6 hours. They'd already performed an emergency C-section. Tyler was born at 1 pound 14 ounces. The doctors said he had a 30% chance of surviving the first week. Madison's throat closed. I got emergency leave, but it took me 52 hours to get back to the States. Transport delays, weather. By the time I walked into that NICU, Tyler had already been alone in the world for 3 days. This tiny thing covered in tubes, fighting for every breath. I'd flown through enemy fire. I'd pulled wounded men from burning helicopters. But walking into that room and seeing my son, knowing his mother was already in the ground and I hadn't been there for either of them, that was the only time in my life I understood how people just give up. His voice had gone thick. Madison reached across the desk without thinking, put her hand over his. He didn't pull away. But you didn't give up. I spent 4 months in that hospital, sleeping in a chair they let me bring in, learning how to feed him through a tube, how to change his diaper without dislodging the monitors, how to hold him without crushing his tiny ribs. And every single day I thought about Sarah, about how I'd promised to be there for her and I'd failed, about how if I'd just gotten out of the military a year earlier, if I'd been home instead of flying missions that didn't matter, she'd still be alive. Madison's heart was breaking. You can't think like that. Why not? It's true. I chose the job over my family, and it killed her. No, a drunk driver killed her. You didn't make that choice. Ethan looked at their joined hands like he was surprised to find them there. Doesn't change the result. They sat in silence. Tyler's breathing was the only sound, soft and steady. Finally, Madison spoke. My father died at his desk, right here in this building. He was working on a pitch for a contract we needed desperately. Heart attack at 68. I was in a meeting 3 floors down. By the time someone found him and called 911, he'd been gone for almost an hour. Ethan's fingers tightened fractionally around hers. I spent the next 6 months thinking I should have known, should have checked on him, should have made him go to the doctor more often, should have noticed the signs. But guilt doesn't bring them back. It just keeps us from living the life they'd want us to have. It was the first time she'd said those words out loud. The first time she'd admitted that her drive to succeed wasn't just about honoring her father's legacy. It was about punishing herself for not saving him. Wednesday afternoon at 3:20, Ethan's phone rang during his shift. Madison was in a budget meeting on the 40th floor. She didn't know about the call until she saw him 2 hours later in the parking garage, sitting in his 15-year-old Honda with Tyler in the back seat, his face the color of old paper. She knocked on his window. He startled, rolled it down. Everything okay? His voice came out strangled. Sarah's parents. They're filing for custody. The world tilted sideways. What? They want Tyler. They're saying I'm not providing adequate care, unstable employment, inadequate living conditions. They've hired a lawyer. Madison's fury was immediate and incandescent. That's insane. You're his father. I'm a janitor living paycheck to paycheck in a 1-bedroom apartment. They're retired doctors with a 4-bedroom house in Bellevue and enough money that Tyler would never want for anything. Except his father. Ethan's hands were shaking on the steering wheel. Tyler was oblivious in the back seat, playing a game on a battered tablet, noise-canceling headphones blocking out the adult conversation. Which sounds better to a judge? Stable grandparents who can provide private schools and college funds? Or a single father with PTSD who brings his kid to work because he can't afford consistent childcare? Madison opened the car door, slid into the passenger seat without asking permission. We're going to fight this. We? I know lawyers, good ones. The best family law attorney in Seattle owes me a favor. We'll stop this. Ethan's laugh was bitter. I can't afford. I'm not asking you to pay. He turned to look at her, really look at her, searching for the angle. There was always an angle. Nobody helped for free. But Madison met his gaze steadily. Why would you do that? The answer was complicated, because she'd watched him parent with such fierce devotion, because Tyler was innocent and deserved to stay with the man who'd sat beside his NICU bed for 4 months, because somewhere in the last month, Ethan Ross had stopped being just an employee and started being something Madison didn't have words for. Because it's wrong, and because you matter to me. The admission hung between them, too much, too fast, too honest. Ethan's eyes widened fractionally, his mouth open, then closed. Madison, I know I'm not asking for anything. I just want to help. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan nodded, once, sharp and military. Okay. It was the first time he'd let someone help him since Sarah died. Madison understood the weight of that trust. The lawyer's name was Catherine Reeves, 56 years old, with a reputation for winning impossible cases through preparation and controlled aggression. She met with them the next morning in her downtown office, 23rd floor, with a view of Puget Sound that had probably cost more per square foot than Ethan's entire apartment. Catherine listened to the whole story without interrupting. When Ethan finished, she leaned back in her leather chair and steepled her fingers. Okay, here's the reality. Grandparents' rights cases are tricky. Washington state law is friendly to biological parents, but judges have wide discretion when they believe a child's welfare is at stake. Ethan's jaw tightened. Tyler's welfare is fine. Better than fine. He's healthy, happy, doing well in school. I believe you. But on paper, you're a high school graduate working janitorial services with documented PTSD and a child who's been sleeping in your workplace. The Ellises will paint a picture of instability. Madison leaned forward. So what do we do? Catherine pulled out a legal pad. We need to demonstrate stable employment with clear career trajectory, consistent housing, character witnesses, psychological evaluation showing you're managing your PTSD appropriately, and ideally evidence that Tyler is thriving under your care, not just surviving. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. I am stable. I show up every day. Tyler is my whole world. I believe you, Catherine repeated, but we need to prove it to a judge who will be looking at tax returns, in pay stubs, in living arrangements. After the meeting, they walked to the parking garage in silence. Madison's mind was racing, pieces clicking into place. Finally, in the dim concrete space that smelled like exhaust and rain, Ethan spoke. I have to take that tech core job, don't I? Madison stopped walking. You don't have to do anything. If I don't, I might lose Tyler. The truth of it was brutal. Madison thought about Catherine's words: stable employment, clear career trajectory. On paper, a janitor who brought his kid to work looked like someone struggling. A six-figure aerospace consultant looked like someone succeeding. The offer's still open. $120,000 annually, remote work, good benefits, health insurance that would cover Tyler's pediatric care. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. If I take it, I have to fly again. Really fly. Training pilots, consulting on mission profiles, demonstration flights. I know. I don't know if I can. Madison stepped closer, close enough to smell the fear on him. She took his hand the second time she'd touched him deliberately. His palm was calloused and warm. You already did. Remember? You flew me across the city when everything in you was screaming no. You can do this. What if I freeze up there with someone's life depending on me? Then you land and try again the next day. But you won't. I've seen you fly, Ethan. You're not broken. The word hit him like a slap. Broken. The thing he believed about himself, said out loud by someone who had seen enough to know better. Okay, his voice was rough. I'll do it, for Tyler. Madison squeezed his hand. For Tyler, and maybe a little bit for yourself. 1 week later, Ethan signed the Tech Core consulting contract in Madison's office. Jordan witnessed, trying not to look too shocked at the janitor-turned-consultant transition. Word spread through Sterling Aviation like wildfire. The cleaning staff congratulated him with backslaps and genuine smiles. The executive team exchanged skeptical looks, but kept their doubts professional. Robert Hart requested an emergency board meeting within 4 hours. Madison sat at the head of the conference table, facing down 7 board members who'd known her since she was a child. Robert led the attack. You're giving a 6-figure position to janitorial staff? This is nepotism at its finest. Madison's voice was ice. He's the most qualified pilot in this building. TechCorps requested him specifically. Because you recommended him. Because he saved our flagship contract when everyone else failed. Robert leaned forward, his face flushed. The board won't stand for this. First, you risk your life with an unstable employee in an unlicensed flight. He was licensed. I verified it personally. And now you're promoting him without proper vetting. What happens when he cracks during a flight? When his PTSD causes an accident, the liability will destroy this company. And you with it. Several board members nodded. Madison felt the room tilting away from her. Her father had built this company through relationships, and relationships were currency Robert knew how to spend. I'm CEO. Hiring decisions are my purview. Robert's smile was poisonous. Not without board approval for contracts exceeding $100,000. Article 7, Section 3 of the corporate bylaws. Your father wrote that provision himself. Madison's stomach dropped. She'd forgotten. In the chaos of the last 6 months, that particular detail had slipped away. Robert hadn't forgotten anything. The board votes on this appointment. All in favor of blocking Miss Hart's recommendation? 6 hands rose. Only Jessica Chen, the COO, kept hers down. Motion carries 6-1. The appointment is rejected. Madison sat very still, aware that everyone was watching for her reaction. Robert wanted her to explode, to prove his point about emotional decision-making. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. This meeting is adjourned. She walked out with her head high and her hands steady, made it to her office, closed the door. Only then did she let herself feel the rage and helplessness churning in her gut. Her phone buzzed. Text from Catherine Reeves. Ellis family filed formal custody petition. Hearing scheduled 3 weeks from today. Madison stared at the message. 3 weeks. 21 days to build a case that Ethan was a stable parent while Robert actively sabotaged their only real solution. She spent the next day restructuring Ethan's contract, made him an independent contractor to Sterling rather than a direct employee, then had Sterling subcontract him to TechCore at the full rate. The company would pocket the difference, making it a profit center rather than an expense. The contract total came in at $98,000 to stay under the board approval threshold. Technically legal, ethically questionable. Exactly the kind of maneuvering her father had been brilliant at. Robert couldn't block it without challenging Madison's authority over operational contracts, which would require a full board revolt. He knew it. She knew it. When she told him what she'd done, his face went purple. This will come back to haunt you. Let it. She told Ethan about the restructure that evening. They were in the simulation room, late as always, the building empty around them. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. You're putting your job on the line for me. I'm betting on the best pilot I know. Big difference, Osihari. If I fail, you won't. They were standing very close, close enough that Madison could see gold flecks in his brown eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Tyler's voice broke the moment. Dad, look what I drew! The boy burst through the door, waving a picture of a helicopter. Ethan turned away, putting distance between himself and Madison. But she'd seen it in his eyes, he'd felt it too. Whatever was building between them, it wasn't one-sided anymore. The custody case moved forward with bureaucratic efficiency. Catherine filed their response, highlighting Ethan's military record, Tyler's school performance, medical records showing consistent pediatric care. The Ellises countered with photographs, bank statements, character witnesses who'd known Sarah since childhood. On Friday morning, Ethan received the Ellis family's formal evidence packet via courier. Madison was with him when he opened it. Photos spilled onto her desk. Tyler sleeping on benches in Sterling Aviation. Time-stamped from security cameras. Tyler eating cereal in the break room at midnight. Tyler doing homework in the stairwell. Ethan's hands were shaking as he rifled through the papers. How did they get these? Madison picked up one photo. The angle was wrong for public security footage. This came from internal cameras, the ones that fed directly to the security office. Access restricted to senior management and board members. Her blood went cold. Robert, Ethan looked at her. What? These are from internal cameras. Your average lawyer couldn't get these without a subpoena, and even then we'd fight it. Someone gave these to them directly. She pulled up the security logs on her computer, reviewed access history for the past month. There, Robert Hart, downloaded camera footage from multiple floors on 4 separate occasions, timestamps corresponding to nights when Ethan had Tyler with him. Madison's fury was a living thing. My uncle did this. Ethan's face had gone blank, that military mask sliding into place. Wait down. Madison thought about the board meeting, Robert's campaign to paint her as unstable, his threats about liability and poor judgment. Understanding crashed over her. Because destroying you destroys me. If I'm supporting an unstable employee who loses his kid to justifiable custody concerns, I look incompetent. The board moves against me. Robert gets what he's wanted since my father died. I'm going to lose Tyler because of corporate politics? The anguish in his voice cracks something in Madison's chest. No, you're not. I'll fix this. How? I don't know yet, but I will. Ethan stood abruptly, the chair scraping across the floor. With all due respect, Miss Hart, don't make promises you can't keep. The formal address felt like a slap. They'd moved past that weeks ago, but fear was making him retreat, building the walls back up. Ethan, I need to go. I need to think. He walked out. Madison let him go, understanding that he needed space to process the betrayal, the fear, the realization that fighting for his son meant becoming collateral damage in a war he never asked to join. She sat in her office as afternoon faded to evening, staring at the photos spread across her desk. Tyler's small form curled on benches, sleeping where his father worked because they couldn't afford better options. Innocent images made sinister by context, weaponized by a man who valued power over decency. Madison thought about her father, about all the times he'd told her that business was war by other means, that you protected your people or you didn't deserve to lead them, that sometimes the right thing and the profitable thing weren't the same, and that's when character mattered. She picked up her phone, called Robert's personal cell. He answered on the second ring. Madison, I assume you've seen the Ellis family's evidence. You gave it to them. Silence. Not denial, just calculation. I gave concerned grandparents information about their grandson's living conditions. You violated confidentiality protocols and interfered in a custody case. I protected this company. That man is a liability. The sooner you accept that, the better. Madison's voice was deadly quiet. Get out of my company. Robert laughed. Your company? Sweetheart, that I've been on this board since before you were born. Your father and I built Sterling together. You're just keeping the seat warm. Then I'll resign. You'll what? You heard me. Call an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. I'll make it official. She hung up before he could respond, sat in the dark office watching the city lights come on below. Her father's company, her father's legacy, everything she'd fought for since his death. But Ethan and Tyler mattered more. Sometimes you sacrifice the kingdom to save the person. That's what her father had never understood, working himself to death for a company that would replace him in a week. Madison pulled up her laptop, started drafting her resignation letter, made it 3 sentences before the reality hit her. Walking away wouldn't solve anything. Robert would still have access, would still make Ethan's life hell, would still win. There had to be another way. Her phone rang, unknown number. Miss Hart, this is Richard Chen from TechCore. Madison sat up straighter. Mr. Chen, how can I help you? We have a proposition. Our annual global summit is in 4 weeks. 500 attendees, investors, military liaisons, international press. We'd like to showcase our new training program with a live flight demonstration, and we'd like Mr. Ross to be the featured pilot. Madison's mind raced. That's very generous, but in exchange, we're prepared to offer a $250,000 bonus to Sterling for the partnership development and establish a full educational trust fund for Mr. Ross's son. Private school through high school, all expenses covered. A $250,000 would satisfy the board. An educational trust would demolish the Ellis family's financial stability argument. But Ethan had barely flown in the last month. Putting him in front of 500 people was asking him to risk everything. Let me discuss this with him. Of course, we'd need an answer by Monday. After Chen hung up, Madison sat staring at her phone. This could save them or destroy them. Either way, the choice wasn't hers to make. She texted Ethan, "Can we talk? It's important." No response for 2 hours. Then, "Tomorrow, Tyler's asking about you." Madison smiled despite everything. She typed back, "Tell him I miss his drawings." Saturday afternoon, she drove to the address Ethan had texted, a small apartment complex in Renton, modest but clean. 3rd floor, Unit 3C. Tyler opened the door before she could knock. "Miss Madison!" He hugged her legs with the unself-conscious affection of children who haven't learned to guard their hearts yet. Madison felt something warm and painful unfold in her chest. Hi, Tyler. Is your dad here? He's making grilled cheese. Want one? The apartment was tiny. Living room barely big enough for a couch and TV. Kitchenette visible over a breakfast bar. But every surface was clean, every corner organized. Tyler's drawings covered one wall, a gallery of helicopters and airplanes rendered in crayon and colored pencil. The expensive set Madison had given him sat in a place of honor on a small desk. Ethan emerged from the kitchen, 2 plates in hand. He looked exhausted. Hadn't shaved, hadn't slept, probably. But his eyes softened when they landed on her. Wasn't expecting you to actually come. You said Tyler was asking about me. He is. Ethan set the plates down. But I wanted to see you too. I'm sorry about yesterday. I was scared, and I took it out on you. Madison waved it off. You're allowed to be scared. Tyler climbed onto the couch next to her, showing her his latest drawing. Another helicopter, but this one had 3 stick figures in the cockpit. One labeled Dad, one labeled Madison, one labeled me. Madison's throat tightened. This is beautiful. It's us, flying together, like you did before. Ethan met her eyes over Tyler's head, so much passing between them without words. After Tyler finished his grilled cheese and returned to his drawings, Madison explained TechCore's offer. Ethan's first response was immediate. No. Hear me out. I can't get up in front of 500 people and risk crashing. I can't do it. The scholarship would secure Tyler's future. The bonus would get the board off my back, and it would show the judge that you're successfully employed in a high-profile position. What if I freeze? What if I prove the Ellis is right? Madison moved closer. Then we deal with it, but I don't think you will. I think you're ready. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper, aware of Tyler in the next room. You have too much faith in me. Maybe you need to have more faith in yourself. Tyler appeared in the doorway. Dad, are you guys talking about helicopters? Ethan managed a smile. Sort of, buddy. Are you going to fly with Madison again? The question was so innocent, so full of hope. Madison watched Ethan's face as he looked at his son, saw the love there, the fierce protectiveness, the desperation to give this child everything he deserved. Maybe, if Madison will fly with me. Tyler turned to her, eyes bright. Will you? Madison looked at Ethan, at Tyler, at the small apartment with its gallery of dreams drawn in crayon, at the choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Yes, Tyler cheered. Ethan just nodded, but Madison saw the fear in his eyes, fear and determination in equal measure. He'd made the decision. For Tyler, for himself, for them. That night, after Madison left, Ethan sat on a small balcony staring at the Seattle skyline. 3 weeks until the custody hearing, 4 weeks until the demonstration. 28 days to prove he was still the pilot he'd been, still the man who could carry others through impossible skies. 28 days to remember how to fly without the ghost screaming in his ears. He thought about Madison's hand in his, her voice saying, "You're not broken," her faith that he could do this, be this, rise from the ashes of everything he'd lost. Maybe she was right, maybe he could, or maybe they'd both fall and Tyler would pay the price. Either way, there was no turning back now. The first training flight happened on a Wednesday morning when the sky was the color of old bruises. Ethan arrived at Boeing Field at 6 a.m., the private airstrip TechCore had arranged for their preparation flights. Madison was already there, dressed in a borrowed flight suit that was slightly too large, her hair pulled back tight. They didn't speak as they performed the pre-flight checks. Ethan's hands moved over the Bell 407 with the mechanical precision of ritual, testing every surface, every control, every connection between intent and outcome. His face was blank, not calm, blank, like someone who'd learned to survive by feeling nothing. Madison climbed into the right seat. The co-pilot position felt different from the passenger seat she'd occupied that first desperate flight. More responsibility, more exposure. She could reach the controls from here, could take over if Ethan froze again. They both knew that's why she was here. The engine started, rotors spun. Ethan's breathing was too fast, too shallow. Madison glanced at him. 6 in. He inhaled, counting silently. She saw his chest expand. Hold. Release. 4 hold. his hands steadied on the collective. 6 out. They lifted off, smooth and controlled. The city fell away beneath them, buildings giving way to the green sprawl of parks and the gray ribbon of I-5. Ethan flew them south, away from water, away from triggers, just sky and land and the rhythmic beat of rotors cutting air. For 20 minutes, it was perfect. Madison watched him work, saw the way his body remembered what his mind questioned, saw the muscle memory overriding doubt. This was what he'd been, what he could be again. Then he banked them toward Elliott Bay. Madison's stomach clenched. She checked the altimeter. 1,500 feet, high enough to be safe, low enough to see details on the water's surface. Boats cutting white wakes, sunlight turning the waves into hammered metal. Ethan's breathing changed, not panic yet, but the precursor, the warning shot across the bow. Talk to me. His voice was tight. Need to do this. Can't avoid water forever. They descended to 1,000 feet. Madison kept her hands near the controls, ready but not interfering. Ethan's jaw was clenched so hard she thought his teeth might crack. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool cockpit air. 800 feet. The water was closer now, details sharpening. A ferry churning toward Bainbridge Island. Kayakers near the shore. Reflections of clouds sliding across the surface. Ethan's hands tightened on the controls. His breathing went ragged. The helicopter's nose dipped slightly. Madison's training kicked in. She didn't grab the controls, didn't panic, just spoke, her voice steady as stone. You're safe, we're safe, nothing's wrong. Ethan's eyes were fixed on the water, seeing something she couldn't. Probably a satellite phone call 7,000 miles away. Probably a state trooper's voice delivering news that ended worlds. 6 in, Ethan, with me. He inhaled, shaky, incomplete, but he inhaled. 4 hold. His hands adjusted fractionally. The helicopter leveled. 6 out. They climbed back to 1,500 feet. Ethan's breathing evened out. He flew them in a wide circle over the bay, not descending again, but not fleeing either. Finding the edge of what he could handle and sitting there, building tolerance like someone strengthening an injured limb. After 10 minutes, he turned them back toward Boeing Field. Landed with the same textbook precision he'd shown that first day. Powered down, sat in silence. Madison waited, gave him space to process. Finally, he spoke. That was the first time I've flown over water without freezing completely. You did it. You really did it. He turned to look at her, something raw in his expression. Because you were here. Because I wasn't alone. The words hung between them, meaning more than their surface suggested. Madison felt the weight of them settling into her chest, taking root. Then I'll be here. Every flight. Every time. They trained every day for the next 2 weeks. Early mornings before Sterling Aviation woke up. Late afternoons after Tyler finished school. Jessica Chen covered for Madison at the office, running the day-to-day while Madison learned to fly. Really fly, not just the basic certification she'd earned years ago, but never used. Ethan was a patient teacher, which surprised her. She'd expected him to be harsh, demanding. Instead, he was methodical, breaking down complex maneuvers into component pieces, explaining not just what to do but why, treating her like a capable student rather than a liability. Aviation is 90% preparation and 10% grace. You prepare for everything that can go wrong. Then when something breaks anyway, you have the grace to adapt. They practiced emergency procedures, engine failures, hydraulic losses, communication breakdowns. Ethan put her through scenarios that made her hands shake and her heart race. But with each repetition, her confidence grew. With each flight, the helicopter became less machine and more extension of her will. One morning, Tyler came with them. Ethan had tried to find childcare, but the regular sitter was sick. Madison suggested he bring the boy, and TechCore approved it. Tyler sat in the small observer seat behind them, wearing a headset 3 sizes too large, eyes wide as dinner plates. Ready back there, buddy? Tyler's voice came through the headset, tinny but excited. Ready, Dad? They flew over Mount Rainier, the massive volcano dominating the horizon. Snow on the peak caught the morning sun, turning it into something from a mythology better than the one humanity had written. Tyler pressed his face to the window, hands splayed against the glass. It's so big. Is that where the snow lives? Ethan's voice was soft, indulgent in a way Madison had never heard. That's where the snow lives year-round, even in summer. Can we touch it? Not today, but someday, when you're older, we'll go hiking up there together. Madison watched them in the reflection on her window. Father and son, connected by blood and survival and love that had been forged in a NICU 4 years ago. Her heart ached with something she couldn't name. Longing, maybe, or recognition that she wanted to be part of this small family built from wreckage. The custody hearing was scheduled for a Thursday. Catherine Reeves had prepared them extensively. Mock cross-examinations, document reviews, strategy sessions that lasted until midnight. The Ellis family's case was built on three pillars: financial instability, inadequate living conditions, and Ethan's untreated PTSD. Catherine's counter-strategy was equally clear. Demonstrate improved financial situation through the tech core contract. Show Tyler's well-being through school records and medical documentation. Present Ethan's therapy records proving he was managing his condition responsibly. That last part had been news to Madison. Ethan had been seeing the VA therapist for 18 months. Weekly sessions that he paid for out of pocket because he'd refused his veteran benefits. Catherine had subpoenaed the records with Ethan's permission. They painted a picture of a man working hard to heal, making steady progress, doing everything right. Wednesday night before the hearing, Madison found herself at Ethan's apartment. She'd brought dinner, claiming she didn't want him cooking when he should be resting. Really, she just couldn't bear the thought of him facing the night alone. Tyler was already asleep. Ethan and Madison sat on his small balcony, eating Thai food from paper containers, watching planes descend towards SeaTac Airport in the distance. Each set of landing lights a story, each aircraft carrying people toward destinations they might not reach. I keep thinking about tomorrow, about what happens if the judge rules against me. Madison set down her container. Then we appeal, we fight. And if we lose the appeal? She didn't have an answer for that. Some losses were permanent, some separations couldn't be undone. They both knew it. Ethan continued, his voice barely audible over the city noise below. Sarah's parents aren't bad people. They're grieving. They lost their daughter and they want something of her back. I understand that. Understanding doesn't make them right. No, but it makes them human. Madison thought about her own father, about the grief that had hollowed her out when he died, about how she'd tried to fill that void with work and control and walls so high nobody could scale them. If she'd had a grandchild, would she have fought for custody just to keep something of Thomas' heart alive? Maybe. Probably. Grief made monsters of everyone eventually. Tomorrow, she said carefully, you walk in there as the man you are now, not the man you were in that NICU 4 years ago, not the man who mopped floors to survive. You walk in as Captain Ethan Ross, aerospace consultant, devoted father, and the bravest person I've ever met. Ethan's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers interlaced without discussion, without permission, just natural as breathing. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we win. The courthouse was downtown, a concrete monument to justice that looked more like a prison. Madison met them in the lobby. Catherine was already there, briefcase in hand, dressed in a power suit that cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. She nodded sharply. Ready? Ethan's face was carved from granite. Ready. The courtroom was smaller than Madison expected. Judge Patricia Morrison presided, 62 years old with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. The Ellis family sat on the opposite side. Linda Ellis was crying quietly before proceedings even began. Paul Ellis held her hand, his face grim. Catherine presented their case methodically. Ethan's military record read into evidence with full citations. His therapy records demonstrating consistent mental health treatment. Tyler's school reports, glowing assessments from his kindergarten teacher. Medical records showing every vaccination, every checkup, every fever treated with appropriate care. Then came the Tech Core contract, freshly signed and notarized. $120,000 annually. Health insurance, educational benefits. Proof that Ethan had moved from survival to stability in the span of 2 months. The Ellis family's lawyer, a thin man named Brennan with wire-rimmed glasses, stood for cross-examination. Mr. Ross, when did this contract begin? 2 weeks ago. And before that, you were employed as a janitor making what, approximately 30,000 a year? Yes. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Right before this custody hearing? Catherine objected. Judge Morrison sustained it, but the implication hung in the air. Brennan pressed forward. Your wife died 3.5 years ago. You left the military shortly after. Why? Ethan's voice was steady. I needed to be with my son. He was in intensive care. I couldn't serve overseas and be present for him. Noble, but you also refused your military benefits. Pension, health care, housing allowance. Why would a devoted father turn down resources that could help his child? The question was a trap. Ethan saw it. Madison saw it. But there was no way out except through. I didn't feel I deserved them. Because of your co-pilot, the one who was paralyzed on your last mission? Catherine was on her feet. Objection. Relevance or us? Brennan turned to the judge. Goes to mental state, Your Honor. Mr. Ross's guilt over that incident is well documented in his therapy records. I'm establishing that his PTSD makes him unable to make sound decisions regarding his son's welfare. Judge Morrison considered. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Mr. Brennan. Brennan faced Ethan again. You blamed yourself for your co-pilot's injuries, didn't you? Yes. You blamed yourself for your wife's death? Yes. You suffer from recurring nightmares, panic attacks, and what your therapist describes as survivor's guilt. Yes. And you want this court to believe you're capable of making sound decisions for a 5-year-old child? Ethan's jaw clenched. Madison watched him wrestling with rage and shame. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but clear. I have PTSD. I'm treating it. I manage it. But it doesn't define me, and it doesn't make me a bad father. I've made mistakes. I've struggled. But I show up for my son every single day. I read to him every night. I help with his homework. I know his teacher's name and his favorite color and what foods make his stomach hurt. I know he has nightmares about hospitals and that he needs the closet light on to sleep and that he counts helicopters instead of sheep. I know him because I'm there. I've always been there, and I always will be. The courtroom went silent. Linda Ellis was crying harder now. Paul's face had softened fractionally. Judge Morrison made notes. Then she called Tyler's kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Anderson, to testify. The woman was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. In your professional opinion, is Tyler Ross thriving? Mrs. Anderson didn't hesitate. Absolutely. He's one of my best students. Bright, curious, well-adjusted. He talks about his father constantly. The love there is obvious and mutual. Have you observed any signs of neglect or trauma? None. Tyler is occasionally tired, which Mr. Ross explained is due to nightmares from his time in NICU as an infant. But he's always clean, well-fed, and appropriately dressed. He brings healthy lunches. He participates in activities. He has friends. Brennan tried to poke holes, but Mrs. Anderson was unshakable. Tyler was fine. Better than fine. He was a happy kid being raised by a devoted father. Then came Madison's testimony. Catherine called her as a character witness. Brennan objected, claiming bias. Judge Morrison allowed it with caveats. Under oath, Madison explained how she'd met Ethan, the emergency flight, his skill, his professionalism, her decision to hire him for tech core work based purely on merit. In your relationship with Mr. Ross, what would you characterize it as? Madison met Ethan's eyes across the courtroom. We're friends. He's someone I admire and respect. Someone I trust. Brennan's cross-examination was brutal. You're romantically involved, aren't you? No. But you want to be? Catherine objected. Judge Morrison overruled. Answer the question, Miss Hart. Madison's heart pounded. Lying under oath was perjury. But the truth would torpedo Ethan's case, make everything look like romantic entanglement rather than genuine merit. She chose truth. I care about him. As a friend, what I want doesn't change what he is, a good father, a good man. Brennan smiled like a shark smelling blood. So you're paying for his lawyer, restructuring contracts to employ him, and spending nearly every evening at his apartment because you care about him as a friend? Yes. Or because you're emotionally involved and your judgment is compromised. Madison's voice went cold. My judgment is fine. Ethan Ross is the best pilot I've ever seen. He saved a $45 million contract when everyone else had given up. He's earned everything he's received and more. Based on one flight, one emergency situation where he admits he nearly lost control, based on watching him work, watching him parent, watching him hold himself together when most people would have shattered. Judge Morrison called for a recess. Everyone filed out. In the hallway, Ethan pulled Madison aside. You shouldn't have admitted that, about caring. It was the truth. It hurt the case. Madison grabbed his hand. I don't care. I'm not going to lie about who you are to me. They stood there in the courthouse hallway, people flowing around them like water around stones. Ethan's eyes searched hers, looking for something. Permission, maybe. Or courage. He found it. Judge Morrison reconvened court an hour later. She'd reviewed all evidence, all testimony, documentation. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of Solomon. This court has heard compelling arguments from both sides. The Ellis family clearly loves their grandson and wants what they believe is best for him. Mr. Ross clearly loves his son and has worked hard to provide for him despite significant challenges. Linda Ellis gripped her husband's hand. Ethan's face was stone. However, this court must prioritize the child's best interests above all other considerations. Tyler Ross is thriving under his father's care. He is bonded to his father. Removing him from that environment would cause significant trauma, regardless of what material benefits the Ellis family could provide. Relief started to flood Madison's chest. Then the judge continued. That said, I have concerns about the timing of Mr. Ross's employment improvement and questions about the stability of his current situation. I am not prepared to rule definitively today. Everyone tensed. Judge Morrison looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Ross, I'm ordering a home study by Child Protective Services. I want a full assessment of your living situation, your work environment, and Tyler's daily life. Additionally, I want to see you successfully maintain this new employment for at least 60 days before making a final determination. Catherine was on her feet. Your Honor, it means I'm continuing this case for 2 months. We'll reconvene after Mr. Ross has had time to prove the stability he claims. In the interim, I'm ordering that Tyler remain in his father's custody, with the Ellis family granted supervised visitation every other weekend. She banged her gavel. Case continued. Outside the courthouse, Ethan looked gutted. 2 more months of this. 2 more months of proving I deserve my own son. Catherine was already planning. It's not ideal, but it's better than losing today. We use this time to build an unassailable case. The home study will go fine. You're a good father. They'll see that. After Catherine left, Madison and Ethan stood on the courthouse steps. The city moved around them, oblivious to the fact that they just fought for something more valuable than any contract. You heard the judge. I need to prove stability, which means I can't fail the tech core demonstration. Madison's stomach twisted. The demonstration was in 2 weeks. 500 people, international press. The judge would be watching, even if she didn't attend. One failure would cascade into losing Tyler. Then we make sure you don't fail. They trained harder. Every day now, sometimes twice. Morning flights before Tyler woke up. Evening flights after he went to bed. Madison's body ached from the constant tension of flying. Her mind stretched thin from managing Sterling Aviation during the day and learning advanced aviation at night. Robert was circling like a shark, sensing weakness. He'd called 2 more board meetings, both times questioning Madison's judgment and commitment. Jessica held the line, defending Madison's decisions, but the cracks were showing. Sterling needed its CEO present, not learning to fly helicopters. 1 week before the demonstration, Madison made her decision. She called a full board meeting for Monday morning. When everyone was assembled, she stood at the head of the table and spoke words that felt like cutting out her own heart. Effective in 90 days, I'm stepping down as CEO. The room erupted. Robert's face showed triumph barely masked as shock. Jessica looked stricken. The other board members exchanged glances. Madison continued over the noise. I'm proposing Jessica Chen as my successor. She has the operational experience and vision to take Sterling into the future. I'll remain on the board and retain my shares, but day-to-day operations should be in more capable hands. Robert leaned forward. This is because of him, isn't it? The janitor? Madison's voice was steel. His name is Ethan, and this is because Sterling deserves a CEO who can be fully present. I can't be that person right now. Jessica spoke up. Madison, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do. After the meeting, Jessica cornered her in the hallway. Your father built this company. My father died for this company. I won't make the same mistake. Madison went home to her empty penthouse and allowed herself exactly 1 hour to cry for her father, for the company she was leaving, for the version of herself who'd thought success meant sacrifice. Then she dried her tears, made herself dinner, and prepared for the next day's training flight. Because some things mattered more than empires. Some people were worth the fall. The TechCore Global Summit was held at their private airfield south of Seattle. 500 attendees filled the viewing stands and hangar. Investors in expensive suits, military liaisons in dress uniforms, press with cameras worth more than cars. The October sky was clear and perfect, not a cloud to mar the blue. Madison stood near the flight line in her co-pilot gear, trying to control her breathing. She'd flown dozens of hours over the past month. She knew the procedures, knew the aircraft, knew Ethan would get them through this. But knowing didn't stop the fear. Ethan was by the helicopter, performing his pre-flight check for the third time. Tyler stood beside him wearing miniature aviator sunglasses that made him look like Tom Cruise in a 5-year-old's body. The boy was grinning, completely oblivious to the stakes. You're going to be awesome, Dad. Ethan knelt to Tyler's level, adjusting the sunglasses. You think so? You're the best pilot in the world, remember? Words said in innocence months ago now returned as faith. Ethan's throat worked. He kissed Tyler's forehead. I love you, buddy. Love you too. Tyler ran off to sit with TechCore's CEO and his family in the VIP section. Madison approached Ethan, her own fear written across her face. Ready? He looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd offered him a bomb, fought for his custody case, learned to fly just so he wouldn't be alone. Who'd given up her father's company for him without being asked? Ready? They climbed into the cockpit. The planned demonstration was complex. Precision maneuvers, simulated rescue scenarios, formation flying with 2 other aircraft. And the finale, a water rescue simulation over Puget Sound. The one thing Ethan had been training toward, the one thing that could break him. The engine roared to life. Through the headset, Madison heard the control tower. November 347, Charlie Papa, you're cleared for departure. Ethan's response was professional, crisp. Roger Tower, 347 Charlie Papa departing runway 23. They lifted off. Smooth, controlled, perfect. The crowd watching below grew small as they climbed. Madison's hands rested lightly near the controls, ready but not interfering. The first 20 minutes were flawless. Ethan flew tight formation with the other aircraft, their rotors nearly touching, the kind of flying that required absolute focus and millisecond perfect timing. He performed a series of auto-rotations, simulating engine failure and bringing them down in controlled descents that looked like falling but were actually the purest form of grace. The crowd was mesmerized. Tyler was bouncing in his seat, pointing at the sky, shouting, "That's my dad," to anyone who would listen. Then came the announcement over the radio. 347 Charlie Papa, proceed to Point Charlie for water rescue simulation. Point Charlie was over Puget Sound. Madison felt Ethan's breathing change, watched his hands tighten on the controls. They were at 2,000 feet, descending toward the water, and every foot lower was another layer of pressure. 1,500 feet. The water was clear below them now, boats scattered like toys, a ferry cutting its path toward Vashon Island, sunlight making the surface into liquid mercury. 1,000 feet. Ethan's breathing was ragged. Madison could see sweat on his forehead, could feel the helicopter's slight wobble as his control wavered. You've got this. We've done this. His voice was strangled. I can't see the water without seeing her car, without hearing that phone call. 700 feet. They were supposed to descend to 50 feet, simulate a pickup, climb back out. But Ethan was locked up, his body there, but his mind somewhere else entirely. Madison made a decision. Her hands moved to the controls. I've got the aircraft. Ethan's training overrode his panic. He released control automatically, hands coming off the collective and cyclic. Madison took over, her month of intensive training kicking in. She descended them smoothly to 500 feet, adjusted for wind, brought them to a stable hover at 100 feet above the water. Through the headset, she could hear Ethan's breathing. Too fast, hyperventilating. She spoke, her voice the only steady thing in his collapsing world. 6 in, Ethan, do it! A gasping inhale. 4 hold. His breathing slowed fractionally. 6 out. You're doing it. Stay with me. Madison held the hover, then began the simulated rescue. She brought them down to 50 feet, held position for 30 seconds as if they were extracting someone from the water, then climbed back to altitude. Every movement smooth, every adjustment precise. The crowd below had no idea. To them, it was perfect. Textbook, exactly as planned. At 1,500 feet, Madison spoke again. I'm giving you back the aircraft. We finish this together. Ethan's hands returned to the controls, still shaking, still fighting demons, but present, there, with her. I've got the aircraft. You've got it. The final maneuver was a high-speed pass over the airfield, then landing. Ethan flew it perfectly, the helicopter screaming across the field at 120 knots, low enough that people ducked instinctively. Then he pulled up, circled, and set them down with the kind of landing that didn't even rattle the rivets. The crowd erupted, standing ovation. Applause that rolled like thunder. They powered down, removed their helmets. Ethan sat motionless, staring at the instrument panel. I froze in front of everyone. I froze. Madison grabbed his face, forced him to look at her. You didn't fail. We flew together. That's what co-pilots do. I had the aircraft for 3 minutes. You had it for 27. We succeeded. Tears were streaming down his face now. I couldn't have done it without you. You'll never have to. They climbed out. Tyler broke through security, running full speed into his father's arms. Ethan caught him, held him like he was the only solid thing in a liquefying world. Dad, Dad, you flew over the water. You did it. Ethan buried his face in his son's hair. I did, buddy. I really did. The press conference afterward was surreal. Questions about Ethan's military background, his PTSD, his return to flying. He answered honestly, explaining his struggles, his treatment, his journey back. When someone asked what made the difference, he looked directly at Madison. Having someone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's what made the difference. Richard Chen presented the scholarship check on stage. $500,000 for Tyler's education, kindergarten through college. Cameras flashed. People applauded. Chen shook Ethan's hand and spoke words that would be quoted in aviation magazines for months. This is what America is about. Heroes coming home and rebuilding. Thank you for your service, Captain Ross. And thank you for showing us what courage really looks like. After the demonstration, after the press, after the crowds dispersed, Madison found herself alone with Ethan on the edge of the airfield. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that cameras couldn't capture. The judge will have seen that, the press coverage, the scholarship, everything. Ethan nodded. We did it. You did it. He turned to face her, and something in his expression was different, softer, open in a way she had never seen. I need to tell you something. When I saw you that first morning in your suit, panicking about that flight, I thought you were everything I'd left behind. Power and money and people who valued success over humanity. Madison's chest tightened. And now? Now I know you gave up power because you valued people. You gave up your company for me and Tyler. Nobody's ever done anything like that for me. You're worth it. Ethan stepped closer. They were inches apart now, close enough that Madison could see the gold flecks in his eyes, could smell the lingering scent of aviation fuel and fierce sweat and something uniquely him. Madison Hart, you make me want to be brave, not just in helicopters, in life. Then he kissed her. Soft at first, tentative, asking permission. Madison answered by pulling him closer, deepening the kiss, pouring months of watching and wanting and wondering into that single moment of contact. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I love you. I think I've loved you since the moment you trusted me to fly you into the sky. Madison's heart was a drum, was an engine, was a thing too large for her chest. I love you too. I think I've loved you since you said you just wanted to help. They stood there as the sun set, two people who'd found each other in crisis and chosen each other in the aftermath. Tyler's voice interrupted them. Are you guys getting to kiss again? Because that was weird, but also kinda nice. They pulled apart laughing. Ethan scooped Tyler up. What do you think, buddy? Should Miss Madison stick around? Tyler's response was immediate. Yes, she can be my mom, right? The question was so innocent, so hopeful. Madison's eyes filled with tears. We'll see, Tyler, but I'm not going anywhere. 2 months later, Judge Morrison reconvened the custody hearing. CPS had completed their home study. The report was glowing. Stable housing, appropriate food, and care. A child who was thriving emotionally and academically. A father who was present, engaged, and actively managing his mental health. The press coverage from the Tech Core demonstration was entered into evidence. Testimonials from Richard Chen about Ethan's professionalism and skill. Bank statements showing consistent income. Letters from Tyler's teacher, his therapist, his pediatrician. Linda and Paul Ellis sat across the courtroom, their faces showing acceptance mixed with grief. They'd seen the demonstrations, seen the press coverage, seen proof that Ethan had risen from the ashes they'd thought would consume him. Judge Morrison reviewed everything, then spoke with finality. Mr. Ross, I've seen enough. You have demonstrated not just stability, but growth. You have taken every challenge thrown at you and met it with grace. Tyler is clearly bonded to you and thriving under your care. She turned to the Ellis family. Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, I understand your desire to be part of your grandson's life. That's commendable. But removing Tyler from his father would cause irreparable harm. Back to Ethan. Petition for custody transfer is denied. Mr. Ross retains full custody. The Ellis family is granted visitation as previously ordered, with the possibility of unsupervised visits pending mutual agreement. The gavel fell, case closed. Ethan's composure shattered. He bent over in his chair, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Madison wrapped her arms around him, holding him through the release of months of fear. Outside the courthouse, Linda Ellis approached them. Her face was tear-stained but peaceful. Ethan, we were wrong. We let grief make us selfish. Sarah would want Tyler with you. We know that now. Ethan's voice was thick with emotion. You can still see him. Not because a judge said so, but because he should know his grandparents. He should know about Sarah through your eyes. Linda hugged him, a brief, careful embrace between two people bonded by loss and love for the same child. Thank you for giving her a beautiful son, for being exactly the father she believed you could be. 3 months after the custody case closed, Madison's transition out of the CEO role was complete. Jessica Chen was thriving in the position, and Sterling Aviation had posted its best quarter in 5 years. Madison had taken the title of Chief Aviation Officer, a role she'd invented for herself that let her focus on the flying side of the business rather than the politics. She spent her evenings at Ethan's apartment, which they'd started calling home without discussing when the shift had happened. Tyler drew pictures of the three of them. Called Madison by her first name, but sometimes, in unguarded moments, called her mom. One evening in January, Ethan took Madison back to the Sterling Aviation rooftop. The same helicopter sat waiting, the aircraft that had started everything. The city spread below them, lights coming on as darkness fell. I've been thinking about that first day, about what you said. Madison wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. I said a lot of stupid things that day. You said fly this helicopter and you'd marry me. Her breath caught. Ethan reached into his jacket, pulled out a small box, opened it to reveal a simple silver ring with 2 tiny wings etched on the band. I was a soldier. Then I was nobody. Then I was a man trying to survive. You didn't just give me a tour or help with lawyers. You gave me back myself. You reminded me that surviving and living aren't the same thing. He dropped to one knee. Madison's hands flew to her mouth. I'm not good with words. I'm better with actions. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to love you every single day. I'm going to support your dreams the way you supported mine. I'm going to be the partner you deserve, the father Tyler deserves, and the man I want to be. Madison Hart, will you marry me? She was crying too hard to speak, just nodded, pulling him to his feet, letting him slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Yes, God, yes. They kissed on the rooftop where everything had begun, where a desperate CEO had made a cruel joke and a broken pilot had proven that sometimes the most invisible people carry the most light. 6 months later, they married on that same rooftop at sunset. Small ceremony. Close friends. Jessica standing as Madison's maid of honor. Tyler as ring bearer, so proud he nearly burst. Ethan's vows were simple. I promise to keep flying in every sense of the word, to never stop moving forward, to honor the past but build our future, to be the father Tyler deserves and the husband you deserve. Madison's vows came from the heart. I promise to always believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself, to be your co-pilot in all things, to love Tyler as my own, to build a life with you that honors everything you've overcome. When the officiant pronounced them married, Tyler threw his hands in the air and shouted, "Does this mean she's my mom now?" Madison knelt to his level, tears streaming. "If you want me to be." "Yeah, I want a mom." They embraced, all three of them, a family forged not from biology but from choice, from showing up, from being present in the hardest moments and choosing to stay. The reception was held in Sterling's executive wing, the same floors Ethan had once cleaned. His old crew was there, congratulating him with genuine warmth. Board members who'd questioned Madison's judgment now toasted their success. Robert Hart had resigned from the board 2 months prior, couldn't stomach watching Madison thrive outside the role he'd tried to cage her in. Near midnight, Madison and Ethan slipped away to the rooftop. They sat in the helicopter cockpit, hands intertwined, looking out at the city below. Ready for the next adventure? Ethan smiled, the real smile she'd worked months to earn. With you? Always. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge between clouds. 3 years ago, Ethan Ross had been a man who'd lost everything. Tonight he had everything that mattered. A son who loved him, a wife who chose him, a career that honored his skills without demanding he sacrifice his humanity. And for the first time since a state trooper made a phone call that shattered worlds, Ethan wasn't haunted by ghosts in the sky. He was flying toward tomorrow. In the distance, a helicopter crossed the sky, its lights blinking red and green. Madison pointed. "Think that's someone's emergency?" Ethan watched the aircraft disappear into the darkness. Maybe, or maybe it's someone heading home. Is that what we are, home? He turned to look at her, this woman who'd seen him at his worst and decided he was worth the investment. Yeah, that's exactly what we are. Below them, Tyler was probably falling asleep in the executive lounge, worn out from dancing and cake. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human struggle and triumph. But here, in this moment, in this cockpit where desperation had become hope, two people who'd learned to fly together held each other and knew they'd found something rarer than success. They'd found home.